So Jim, thanks for being here. I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about your childhood and tell us where you grew up and all that.
Oh, it was horrible. I grew up on a dairy farm, and after working on a dairy farm for a few years, you start looking for, what am I doing? I don't know if I want to do this forever because it's hard, but it's funny because I knew exactly what I wanted to do when I saw the Beatles for the first time on television. And so I put a little band together, a little party band in high school, and just kind of started from there.
So who taught you how to play guitar? When
I taught myself.
Really?
Yeah, when you live on a dairy farm,
Okay.
you're out in the country, there's not a lot to do except, ride horses and
Right.
chase cows. So I would just sit in my room and put on records to, Beatles or whoever it was, and just learn, just taught myself.
So when did you start guitar, you think?
I actually have a picture of the day my dad gave me my first guitar.
Aww.
So I was probably about 10, I guess, because I did my first professional, I made $30, but my first professional gig when I was 12, so. Yeah.
Wow, where was that?
It was some little club on the outside. I can't believe they would even let
I was
me
gonna
in,
say that
because they served alcohol, but it was a different time, but there was a guy in town, he was a mailman in our little hometown, and he had a band that played in nightclubs on the weekend, and his son told him about this little prodigy, that he went to school with, and he hired me sight unseen. He had never heard me play, and,
oh my gosh.
And we just went in there, and he would just say, "All right, here's a song, key of G, go," and I just kind of jammed with him, That was the first one, and I was hooked.
And then you started a band in high school, and
Yeah, I was in mostly like rock and roll bands,
Okay.
I had the long hair. I'm gonna say early 80s, I guess it was. Got a gig with a band in Houston, Texas, and they were fixing to go in and record. I was 19 when this happened.
Oh, wow.
And they wanted to go in and record a record, and there was a local producer named A.B. Middlestead. And he actually had produced some like hit records. We went into this little studio, and I was a bass player at the time. And he heard me play bass and asked me if I'd be willing to come back and do some more sessions for him. Majority of those sessions were country. Before that, I'd never, I was a rock guy all the way. But after I started working with some musicians that were older than me that really knew what they were doing, I really fell in love with country music and the melodies and the lyrics, and it just kind of felt like I found my home right there.
So who did you first learn? What country artists had the biggest effect on you? Or?
Merle Haggard. First country record I ever bought was If We Make It Through December, Merle Haggard. I just loved the honesty and the melodies that he had. There was just nobody like him. And then Buck Owens, I always liked Buck. And but really, I just mainly worked in the studio. A lot of those sessions were just like Western swing kind of stuff.
Right.
That's the beauty about when you're a studio musician. You play on everything. I mean, I remember playing on a square dance record one time.
Nice.
They were gonna do. I think they said they were going to do "Don't It Make Your Brown Eyes Blue." So I find the record to "Don't It Make Your Brown Eyes Blue," and it's this beautiful melody, and then I get to a square dance session, and it's like, but it's like, oh nowhere, dance so blue, it's that kind of thing. So it was pretty.
That's
so I learned all those parts for nothing, But anyway.
And then, so you were 19, and you're in Texas, and so did you ever think about going to college? Did your parents want you to?
Oh, yeah, I did. I thought about it. But there was this band that came through town and they had a really pretty girl, lead singer, and they needed a piano player. And I didn't play piano, but I liked that girl a whole lot. So I spent 3 days with my band, where my band rehearsed. My keyboard player, we had a B3, a Hammond B3, and I stayed in that room for like 3 days straight and learned all their songs. And I didn't even know what chords I was playing. I was just, I was just playing, and they auditioned me, and I got the gig. The only way I knew what chord I was playing was by the shape of my fingers, how they looked on the keyboard. I knew where middle C was, but beyond that, I didn't know it. but I could fake it, you know. And so, and I was a pretty good singer.
Yeah.
And so I would be able to sing harmony and that kind of stuff. But you know, by the end of it, you know, I was with them about a year and a half.
Oh my gosh.
I know, but
So you never told them
I was playing
that-
solos and everything. Oh, they figured out
Oh, they
pretty
did?
quick that I didn't know what I was doing, but I was really, you know, determined. They liked that part of it.
Yeah. How'd you get to Nashville then?
I was a bass player in a recording studio, and I started writing songs.
Okay, so that's when you
And
started.
yeah,
Okay.
and so instead of getting paid, because I was gigging at night and then doing sessions during the day, rather than get paid for the session, I would trade off studio time. And so I wrote a couple of songs, and I went into the studio, and I had a couple of little local hits.
Oh, really?
And so I put my own band together and started traveling around, and some people from Nashville came down and heard me play, and it was a guy named Ray Baker. He heard me and he told somebody in Nashville about me, and I started doing television shows here in Nashville on the old Nashville network, and I was kind of a regular on there. I would do it every 2 or 3 months. I would go on TV and it started. I built up a little following in Texas and just toured around there, and I did that forever. One day we were opening up for a group called Shenandoah. I don't know if you're familiar with Shenandoah. And I decided that day just to play nothing but my own songs. And after I got through playing, I got a note asking to come. They wanted to talk to me out on the bus, you know.
Shenandoah did?
Shenandoah
Oh, that's
did.
cool.
And so I didn't know what I thought maybe I did something wrong. And,
In trouble.
and they asked me, they said, whose songs are those? And I said, they're mine. They said, you wrote all those by yourself? And I said, yes, sir. And he said, man, you need to move to Nashville. And so it kind of put that thought in my head. And so I didn't know a soul here, really. And I just decided one day I was going to do it. My wife, she gave him her blessing. She said, you know, her exact words were, she said, I don't want us to be married in 10 years and you wonder if you could have had success in Nashville, so I want you to go do it. And so that was all I needed to hear. But our deal was, if I didn't get a record deal in a year, that you know, we didn't know, that I had to come home. And that was the agreement. And so 1 year and in 2 days, I got a record deal. So
Wow.
it worked out. Things happened really fast for me. I started going around to the different recording studios and handing out my CD to people. You know, just a couple of songs that I'd sang, and in case somebody might need a demo singer. And so one night I was at the Texas Longhorn, which is was steakhouse here, and I overheard these two songwriters talking that their demo singer got sick, and they needed somebody to sing a demo for them, and it turned out to be Aaron Barker, you know, who wrote a bunch of George Strait songs. And I didn't know him. I just said, well, I'll sing it for you. And they said, oh, you're a singer? And I said, yeah, I just moved to town. And so they said, well, we got nothing to lose. And so they hired me, and I went in and I sang it and did all the backgrounds in like an hour. And they started telling their friends, and within a couple weeks I was working.
Wow.
I mean, I was doing 6 or 7, 8 demos a day. And it was crazy. From that, I got hired to sing a demo for Guy Clark.
Wow.
And I was at the EMI studio down in the basement of their old building. And I guess the president of EMI came down to check on Guy because he was kind of a notorious troublemaker.
Yeah.
In a good way. But he came down to check on Guy to see how things were going, and he heard me sing. And he asked me right then, he said, can you write? And I said, yes, sir. And he said, play me something. So I played him 2 songs, and they signed me right there.
Wow.
And I'd been in town 3 months.
Oh my gosh.
So
that isn't the
first
normal.
First song I wrote was a hit.
Okay, so will you play a little bit? What was the first
Well,
one?
okay.
Do you remember?
Yeah, I can remember. I'm gonna get a little sip of water here.
Yeah, that is that.
I wrote. I was out with one night I just moved to town, and I met this guy. We were shooting pool. We were in a little bar, And turns out we were kind of from the same area. He grew up about 20 miles from where I did.
Oh, wow.
And so he said, well, let's write a song, because we were both, brand new in town. And I said, what do we want to write about? So we started talking about things we had in common. And it turned out that our dads at one time, my dad was a machinist. He worked on these big machines. And turned out his dad did that for a while.
Oh, wow.
And so we started talking about that, and I would tell him, I said, what I remember about those days was, he'd come home and he'd be tired and his hands would be all greasy and beat up and everything. So we wrote a song basically about that, and it's like, let's see if I can remember it.
Okay.
At the local diner, just outside of town, comes in an hour early, beat the morning crowd. He stares out the window, stirs his coffee cup. Another day, another dollar, short of catching up. Same old job, same old routine. In his heart, he knows what it brings. A two-bedroom house for his family of three. He's giving his all, making ends meet. A second-hand car, a washing machine. They may not have much, but he gets what they need with the hands of a working man. Anyway, tired
I
of
love
it.
that song.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank
that's
you.
beautiful.
That's the first song I wrote in Nashville.
That's amazing.
After having my own band for several years down in Texas, and I did everything. I mean, I booked the band. I took care of all the traveling and all the hotels and the contracts, everything. So when I came to town, I did have a pretty good knowledge of the business side of things, and so I always handled it like a business. I showed up every day. I mean, my goal was, or my thought was, I want to wake up every day and do something, big or small, to get me a little closer to the goal that I was shooting for. Well, the reason I was in the Longhorn is because I heard Songwriters hung out there.
Right.
And so I went in there and I said, well, maybe I'll meet somebody today. And so and then that particular night I did.
Wow.
I can't tell you how many songs I've written. When I first signed at EMI, like I say, 3 months after I moved to town, I wrote 140 something songs that year. It was and I've averaged about close to that now, even now.
140 songs a year.
Even when I don't write as much as I used to, but even when I'm not writing, I'm constantly working on song ideas, and because maybe I'll finish it myself, or maybe I'll just save it and write it with an artist or whoever I'm working with at the next time.
So do you have a big spreadsheet with all of your ideas?
No, I have it there on my iPhone. I just
put it in the notes.
I just got a little. I just scroll down and I see what I might have, and sometimes it'll be something I like. What was I thinking when I wrote that down? I have no idea, But at the moment, I had a thought and I wrote it. I write it down, or I might. There's a little recorder on it, and sometimes I'll sing a melody into the phone. And then that's kind of how I do it, I'm still pretty old school, I don't, I do work with a lot of track guys and things that do that kind of stuff, but to me, it always comes down to a great lyric and a good melody and more than anything, a great idea. It has to be a great idea. You have nothing without it, so.
So is that usually where you start, is with the...
Yeah, and it's also not just an idea, but a unique way of telling the story, a unique twist on a good idea.
Right. So you're at EMI for 3 months. You've already gotten 2 cuts as a new writer, and so that are the publishers putting you together with other?
Well, no. Originally, I was singing demos for people, and I
Okay.
was and if I wrote with somebody, or if I sang a song for somebody that I liked their stuff, I would ask them, would you be interested in writing with me? And I got shot down a lot. No, so a lot of them said no, but every now and then one would say yeah. And so over time, I think they saw how hard I was willing to work, and that's half of it. They see you're putting in the work, and if I show up and if I get a co-write with a hit songwriter, and I show up with a bunch of ideas because I spent a week working on ideas, then that'll get you back in the room again with them, because if you walk in and don't have anything, or you don't, then they're not going to ask you to come back. There's no reason to. So,
Right. So as the newer writer, you're expected to pretty much bring the.
Well,
At
I
least
mean,
something
yeah.
to the
I mean,
party.
at least, we don't necessarily wind up. We may not write it,
Yeah.
your idea, but at least show up with something.
Right.
Because if you don't, a guy, wonderful, great songwriter, Kim Williams. I don't know if you remember
yeah.
Kim. And I asked him one time. I said, "Would you be willing to write with me?" Because I sang a demo for him. And he said, "Well, Jim, I'm just going to be honest with you," because he'd had Garth Brooks cuts and all kinds of stuff. "Well, Jim," he said, "look at it like this. I make my living writing songs." He said, "I put my kids to college writing songs, and I can either write with an artist that has a record deal, producer, one of my buddies who I've written hit songs with before, or you." And I had nothing going, and he said, and I thought, I really appreciated it. He was not trying to be a jerk. He was being very, he was just letting me know what the truth of it was. He was being very honest. And so when I got a record deal, he was more than happy to write with me, but I never did write with him until I got one. But,
You said Kim?
yeah, I did. He was one of the first people I called. But it was worth the wait. He was a wonderful guy.
So you had your record deal. How long were you doing that for?
Well, I think I got signed in maybe '96, but we didn't. We spent a year doing the record, but we just never could get on the same page. Well, I went out on a radio tour, and the label that I was on actually folded, and so they decided to just, since the label I was on folded, to just take us to Arista. But by the time I got to Arista, my record had been already recorded, and they didn't know much about me, and they weren't really invested in the project too much. And we were talking about singles, and their ideas of what they wanted to put out on me were completely different than what I was thinking they were going to be. But by then, I was having, some success as a songwriter, because I would play them a song, and they would say, "Well, we think you ought to record this song over here and that we found for you."
Okay.
And so I would let it go. I would tell my publisher, "We'll just pitch it and see if anybody wants it." And so I started having hit songs on other bigger artists, a lot bigger than me. And so after a couple of those, I just thought, well, maybe, maybe I need to chase this down a little bit more. It's funny. I was devastated when the record deal ended, because that's what I moved to town to do, was to be an artist, and I was going to pack up and go back to Texas and just put the band back together. And Craig Wiseman called me, and Craig is probably the most successful songwriter in Nashville, and has been for years. And just out of the blue, he called me and he said, "I heard you lost your record deal," and I said, "Yeah," and he said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "Well, I guess I'll put the band back together and play honky-tonks for a while." And he said, "Well, I really wish you'd think about that." He said, "Whether you know it or not," he said, I write with a lot of artists, which is what I was trying to be. And he said, "You're a songwriter, whether you know it or not." And so I thought about it, and here's this really successful songwriter believing that I could do it. And so I thought I'd hang around and do it a little while longer, and it was wound up being the right choice. It's I've had about 200 songs recorded now, and some really big hits. Including my biggest one was with Craig. I had this idea for the song the day before we got together, and I called him up and I told him what my idea was, and basically it was about, my thought was like, you know, when you first get married, you don't have any furniture, you know, and eating pizzas on the floor, and but that was the good stuff. I got to the writing appointment the next day, and there was a security guard there, and he had shaved all his hair off. We started talking, and he was telling me all these wonderful stories about her, and he was really never talked about the bad stuff. He was just celebrating her life. And I'll never forget what he said. He said, you know, she taught me as much about dying as she did living.
Wow.
And I went, wow, that's the good stuff right there. And so I went and told Craig that, and we got really inspired that day, and we started writing about 10:30, and about 7:30 that night, we walked out of there just shaking. We had low blood sugar. We didn't eat lunch or anything, but we came up with this. Me and my lady had a first big fight, so I drove around till I saw the neon lights of the corner bar. Just felt right, so I pulled up. Not a soul around but the old barkeep, down at the end looking half asleep. He walked up and said, what'll it be? I said, the good stuff. He didn't reach around for the whiskey. Didn't pour me a beer. His blue eyes kinda went misty. He said, you can't find that here. 'Cause it's the first long kiss on the second date. Your mama all worried when you get home late, and dropping the ring in a spaghetti plate. 'Cause your hands are shaking so much. It's the way that she looked with rice in her hair, eating burnt supper the whole first year, and asking for seconds to keep her from tearing up. Yeah, man, that's the good stuff. That's the good stuff.
Wow, that is good stuff. That's
Thank you.
amazing.
Thank you.
That song is so great.
Thank
Touches
you.
so many emotions. And
Thank you.
and so how did Kenny Chesney?
This is the story I heard, because we wrote that song on a Friday. This shows you how hardworking I was and how determined I was. I used to do my sessions on the weekends, so I wouldn't interfere with my writing days. I didn't want to, so I went on a Saturday. We wrote it on a Friday. I demoed it on a Saturday, and that Tuesday we had a meeting with RCA. They freaked out over the song. Kenny didn't want to cut it, and the reason was, he said, this is the story I heard anyway, that, you know, his fans were all, you know, they expect, you know, like party, up-tempo, fun kind of, you know, songs from him. And Joe Galani, the head of the label, said, well, Kenny, seems like you've already got those people. How about let's go get some new ones? And so Kenny, that made sense to Kenny, and he recorded it, and it was a 7-week #1 song.
Wow.
Was Song of the Year, and you know, it was just a blessing.
What does it feel like when you hear your song on the radio for the first time?
Yeah,
Is it
even
awesome?
now, I mean, yeah, it's still amazing. First time I heard the good stuff on the radio, I was just amazed. And when it was about to go #1, Kenny actually called me, and he said, dude, this song's it's gonna be a big one. And I said, yeah, I'm hoping I'll get #1. He goes, he said, I think we're gonna get many weeks at #1, and he was right. At the time, it tied the record at 7 weeks for the most weeks at #1. So yeah, I'm very proud of that song, and you know, so it's one of those miracles, you know. So
Was it nerve-wracking being at the awards ceremony?
No, I mean, because by that time, you know, the pressure was off. Song had already done what it was gonna do, and the first time to go to the Grammys, now that was nerve-wracking. I've been nominated for 2 Grammys, and the first time I knew we weren't gonna win. We were up against Jesus Take the Wheel.
Oh.
All my friends would call, hey man, congratulations, you just got nominated for a Grammy. What are you up against? And Jesus Take the Wheel, and they go, oh, heck? Sorry, man, you know. So
What song was that?
it was I Don't Feel Like Loving You Today. Gretchen Wilson recorded.
I love that song.
Thank you. And then I got nominated for Are You Gonna Kiss Me or Not? Me and David Lee Murphy wrote that, and got to go back, and Taylor Swift beat us out of that one. So, but that's all right. We got to go to the party.
There you go.
My wife got
There
to
you
go shopping.
There,
you
there
know,
you go.
It was all good.
It's all good.
So.
Well, it sounds like you have a really strong work ethic. You don't wait for things to happen.
No, you can't. You can't. You know.
Any other advice that you would give somebody else who is just
Well,
starting
just
out?
write what you know. For me, don't chase what you're hearing on the radio. Don't, because you're already behind if you do that.
Right.
Because you know what they're doing on the radio today would not be what they do in 6 months. You know, just write what you like. I'll give you an. For a while there, country music got really pop. I mean, like. I remember Faith Hill had like I Can Feel You Breathe washing, and I was sitting in a bar with Harlan Howard, the legendary Harlan Howard, who wrote I Fall to Pieces, and I was complaining. I said, "Dang it, Harlan!" I said, "You know, I moved to town to write country songs, and now they're going pop. I guess I'm gonna have to start learning how to write pop songs." And he took a swig of his drink and he looked at me and he said, "A drowning man will reach for anything." And he said, "Just do what you do. So be honest, write what you love, write what you know. Don't chase what other people are doing, be your own." There's a lot of great writers right now having great success, and they deserve it. They're great writers. But I'm not them. They can't do what I can do, and I can't do what they can do. So just be you. And if there's a good chance if you like what you're doing and it comes from a good place, then somebody else will like it too.